All right, welcome back. I am here with an amazing person, longtime friend, now colleague, and she just made a move in her career, and I'm excited to hear about it. And Sanja Licina, thank you for joining us from Buenos Aires, Argentina. How are you?
Oh, I'm amazing, Al. How are you?
I am doing well, and yeah, I feel. I mean, as I shared with you backstage, this is the fun part. I get to learn and engage with amazing people, and you, of course, being one of them. And I'm really excited about the topic that you're going to explore today. And it goes on the theme of inclusion. It goes on the theme of culture and engagement, and all these things that are, being they're a struggle now with remote work and just where we are, with the pandemic. And so I would love to hear your ideas and perspectives. So if you would introduce yourself and, get on, and I will get out of the way and we'll have a chat, in a little bit. That sound good?
Perfect. Can't wait.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right. Enjoy.
So, as Mel was mentioning, I'm Sanja. I'm currently sitting in beautifully sunny and warm Buenos Aires, Argentina. Hence the reason to smile. It's warm, it's summer. I will not rub it in, but just so most of you know, when when it's summer where you are in the northern hemisphere, I'm usually with my coat. But lots of reasons to smile today. So, as Al mentioned, he and I have known each other for several years. And whenever we have a chance to speak, especially lately, as so much is going on in the world, we have just these incredible dynamic conversations and share a lot of thoughts and ideas about work, about the world. Where do we go from here? And so, as Al mentioned, actually, in December of last year, I changed jobs. And I think I have probably spoken at every PAFOW for as long as I've known Al. And so I thought, there's one coming up in January, and there's so much that happened in the world. And I feel like there's so many thoughts I want to share, but I'm in this new role. And, what will I have to say? Will I actually have something impactful? And so we exchanged a few messages over time. And I think it was a few weeks ago, I said, "Hey, Al, I'm going to be running a survey in my new company. And I think that there's just so much to ask people. And it's been such a challenging year. And I would love to be able to come on and share that experience and share our findings. And, would you be okay with that?" And Al, of course, being the amazing person he is, said, "Yes, come on board. Would love to hear about what you're doing today." And so that's what I'm going to be sharing. I think a lot of us are going through change, whether you've changed organizations lately or not. I think very few of us could say that if we think to January of last year, that we were in the same place where we are today, whether it's physically, where it's mentally, emotionally. Our jobs likely changed, at least in some way, whether it's where we're doing it from, if it's our home or, in many different ways. So one of the conversations I've had with a lot of my friends and colleagues is, how are people feeling in the organizations? What's going on? What's happening from work with work from home? Or, how are we approaching these things? And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and tell you a little bit about the study that we just did at QuestionPro, where I am today. So one of the conversations that, Al and I have had an ongoing basis is, where are people working and what's going on? And I thought about, well, there is a saying that home is where the heart is. And again, for a lot of you that know me, know a little bit about my life story and know that I've moved from different continents and lived in many different places. And I've always found that no matter where I'm physically, if I'm happy, if my heart is there, everything else falls into place. So the physicality for me personally wasn't as important, but I also knew that that was my personal experience and maybe different for everyone. So it's something that I wanted to study. So I think a lot of us too, when the pandemic started, if you would have asked us, where we envisioned that we would be in 2021, it would either be, January of 2021, it would either be optimistically saying, everything will be okay and the pandemic will be over, or realistically maybe thinking that, because I think most of us didn't think that it would last this long, or really hope that it wouldn't last this long. And so there's this ongoing debate around most organizations that have knowledge workers that have the ability to actually take people from the office and put them in their respective homes or allow them to work from somewhere else did that. And there was a lot of conversation around, well, what do we do? And there's still a lot of conversation around what we do. And my best advice before going into our insights and data is that it is going to be different for each organization, much like organizational culture is different for each company. I think every company is going to have to find their own solution. I think all of us are really looking to others and seeing what is happening. What did somebody else find out? What does the data say? What should I be doing? But ultimately, we'll be the ones who decide what's the right thing for us, for our people, and for our organization. And so that segues me into talking a little bit about QuestionPro. So what is our philosophy? What are we doing? So I love all the, how it started and how it's going, photos and different things. And so how did it start for us? This isn't the start of our company. The company was founded in 2005. This was more the start of the pandemic. And we're headquartered out of Austin, Texas. We are a global organization. So we're in Latin America, we're in Europe, Middle East, Asia. And this was before my time, but admittedly, our CEO, said before the pandemic started that he was very passionate about people being in the office and he wanted everybody there at 8 a.m. And because of the collaboration and camaraderie and accountability, he was a big proponent of people physically being in the workplace. And that was his philosophy. Well, lo and behold, so that's how it started. And this is how it's going. So our philosophy now changed very much to work from anywhere. It was done mostly because we had to last year because of all the different health risks. And again, much like everybody else that could move their people from their offices into their homes or places where they had fewer interactions, they did. And QuestionPro did the same. And being a technology company, we were very fortunate that we were able to do that. And we grew last year as much as we did the year before in revenue and bookings. And so our CEO, being the very honest guy that he is, reflected back at the end of the year and said I was wrong. I wanted everybody in the office. I thought that was the way we had to run the business. And the way that our organization shifted, I can see that we're performing really well. And to be forever. He didn't put a stake in the ground and say, on this day we'll reevaluate. We're learning as we go. Now, one of the things that we have found out is we had a virtual social hour at the end of December. And of course, being a survey company, we did a poll. And one of the trivia questions was, which is the one state we haven't had an office in so far. And there were a few different options, and one of them was New York State, and that was the right answer, except after I joined, I had recently hired a person in New York, and I said, no, wait, not true anymore. We have an office there. We have a person there. And so in many ways, we've been very lucky because of our philosophy to be able to find some really great talent that is not geographically constrictive anymore, and that the pandemic changed people and a lot of mindsets and their closeness with family and what they want to do with their life, that we are going to continue with that philosophy and again, continue to talk to our people, look at the marketplace, understand what are the best things to do, but with a very much open mind and ongoing data collection so we can see also what the market and how our people are feeling. So I mentioned that I joined QuestionPro at the end of last year, and one of the first things that I wanted to do is partner with our leadership and run a survey. And I thought, why is this important? Why is this, one of the first things that I'd like to look at? And if you were following the research last year, you could see that was a ton of talk, and Alan, just the last presentation, talked about empathy, and it was a theme that occurred or was talked about a few times today. One of the things that I wanted to talk about again is how can we actually complement what the managers and the leaders are doing and be able to have these conversations at scale and be able to open up our culture in a different kind of way than maybe ever before and connect with our employees. And so this is not going to be a surprise to anybody, these data points, but sharing it as a part of a story or in case anybody needs it, is that one of the biggest shifts, of course, we know we accelerated digital transformation like tenfold in last year, and organizations just surpassed all of their expectations around collaboration and digitalization. But one of the biggest areas was actually an employee interaction. And that maybe did surprise me a little bit, because I've seen the numbers about digitalization of organizations and collaboration in general, but that it was one of the biggest areas. I thought, wow, what a great time to actually take advantage of that, because as our employees are more and more used to using technologies to interact with each other, now is a really that and have those conversations with them more at scale. In thinking about that as well, it's been very interesting to think about, trends for 2021 and trends for the future work. And I would say that and probably many years before, it was a lot more predictable than it is today. But one of the concepts that I actually just absolutely love, and I've talked to Al about it numerous times, and Dan from Radical, is this blending of this whole experience of the employee. And how do we realize that we're not just working with the person wearing the worker hat, but actually, how do we create the best culture and the best support system for the person that's a child, a parent, a significant other, a friend, a pet owner, all of these different things? How do we make sure to relate to that? And I think that that's a really great segue into thinking about connecting with employees moving ahead. So looking at our particular survey, this is more information that I usually share in a slide, but I thought maybe it could be useful just to look at some of the wording and some of the dimensions. So in thinking about what we wanted to find out from our workforce going into this very complex year, leaving a very complex year, it was really, really difficult to narrow down the different measures. There was so much we wanted to ask, but we didn't want to send out a survey and say, please, pencil in an hour of your time. We'd love for you to fill out a bunch of forms. We know that doesn't work. And so there were a couple of things that we did in thinking about, out of all of the different culture measures that we have, engagement measures, wellness measures, what are the most important things to ask? But then also, how do we ask them? I wanted to share just some recommendations around how we structured asking questions. And to us, it was really important that it followed a structure of a conversation. So I envisioned myself sitting down with one of my teammates or one of my team members and really genuinely wanting to know how they are. And how would I ask those questions? How would I open up that conversation for them to feel like, maybe I should just tell her I'm fine? Because if I'm not fine, is she going to take away an assignment, or should I be worried? Or when are our reviews coming up? None of that. It's a human to human interaction saying, how are you doing? Are you okay? How are things going? What can I do to help you? Like, really, what can I do to help you? And so again, these are just some of the examples of the questions that we asked. And on the right-hand side are just some of the pillars. And again, it was so hard to narrow them down because there are just so many things that are really, really important to understand now and to plan for this year. Doing some research, well-being stood out as something that was really critical. We know, anywhere from stress issues to mental health issues, to just physical issues. It's something there was greater awareness in 2020, and there was a much greater strain on people. And so we took a bit of an educated, calculated bet and created a lot of our items around well-being. And lo and behold, in many ways, it paid off. So I'm not going to go through all of our findings. It would be way too much, not as relevant. I wanted to be transparent and show how do we score in different areas, and then what do we do. The one that we really celebrated was diversity and inclusion. And again, for those of you who know me, know how incredibly important that is to me. Those of you who are just getting to know me are learning that now, but I think that Al has done such a tremendous job with his event a few days ago, where the whole focus was on that. Today, we had some really, really incredible presenters that shed the light on that. And so I think as a society, as a community, we really care about it. And so to me, it was a little bit of a moment of celebration that, with us being in so many different countries and a very diverse company, that people by and far were saying, I feel comfortable being myself at work, and I feel comfortable connecting with people of different backgrounds. And it doesn't matter what title somebody has, I feel like I can be myself and vocal around them. And so that was our highest one. And I felt like a really good moment of celebration. And then well-being. I thought, oh, again, it was a little bit of science, a little bit of gut. And I was glad that we asked so many items around it because we were able to tease out some things and say, what can we do to more effectively help our people with well-being? So when we created the measure, I mean, all of you know it's a people analytics community, but there is so much science that goes into it. And how do you ask the questions and how do you factor the questions? And are we asking enough? And how are we validating? And so to be able to, in some ways, go out to our people and ask as fast as possible, we didn't factor all of the things ahead of time. We did some of the grouping afterwards. And so for us, our philosophy, my philosophy is the relationships with others are really important. Whether it's your manager, whether it's your peers, whether it's your team, there's this whole impact of everyone in the organization. And one of the things that, as far as impact of others, showed up is that my health and well-being matter to my manager. Now, in some ways, we would think maybe it's a no-brainer, but I don't like to take many things for granted. And so to me, again, going back to the concept of the whole self, is that it was really positive to see the managers and leaders were transparent that they cared about their people. And that when unfortunately some of our colleagues did get COVID, that are, from the CEO down, everybody was very, very vocal about taking time off, taking care of yourself, taking care of your family. If your family member was sick, that it's health first, and we would figure everything else out, and that people would jump in for each other, and our teams were getting that. One of the items that I plan to go back and share a little bit more with our leaders that kind of, maybe took me a little bit by surprise, but it was really great to know, is our leaders lead by example because they take care of themselves physically and emotionally. And I thought, well, it's a good moment for introspection, is it that we don't? By retelling our teams, you should take care of yourself, but I'm going to work long hours and I'm going to eat lunch at my computer? Or is it that we're not being transparent enough about what we're doing? Is it that our teams are just seeing if we happen to send an email late at night because we're all in different time zones, but we're not telling them every time we did yoga or ate a salad or went for a walk or did, whatever we're able to do at the moment for our own well-being. So this is going to be one of our action items. Either we need to be honest with ourselves and be better with what we're doing, or we need to be more transparent to our teams, because we don't want to come across as somebody that's saying, do as I say and not as I do, even if it's the best of intention. So that was a really good action item for leadership, and also the image that we're portraying to our workforce. We also looked at regions, and this was really interesting because counterclockwise, we looked at the mean of well-being, and in some ways, Latin America just blew it out of the water. People seem to be higher overall. And then as you go through Middle East, Asia, Europe, and the US, it goes down. There's some things that we're digging into there. There's always a debate around culture and do people approach things differently? How much of an impact does that have? We are also set up a little bit as a matrix organization where we have regional GMs, and then we also have leaders of different departments. But in many of these cases, the continents or the countries are led by a particular leader that's unique to each region. And so it's also understanding a little bit, what are these different leaders portraying? How are they managing their teams? But we saw those systematic differences because, again, as all of you know, when you look at the scores overall, there's so much to peel back. And so for us, that's a really great learning. And we already have some action items, even from our Latin America team, around what the leader there is doing, even for care packages, smaller things, the way that he is communicating with his teams, etc. But it was good to see that it was actually quite distinct in the different areas. While we were looking at that and thinking about what the leaders do, we also looked at the items in a little more detail that fed into these overall measures of well-being. And I don't know, maybe depending on where you are, this is going to surprise you this much, especially I spent half of my working life in the US and understood the grind and just oftentimes the mentality of a lot of companies based out of there. And where we saw the two really big differences isn't people being able to shut off from work during the day and being able to take time off and recharge. And so again, is it something about the maturity of our businesses? Is it about the leader? Is it about the societal norms? The US maybe went through more turmoil in the last years economically, and I think probably more in the US than anywhere else. There was the first female recession. And so are there some factors that were happening where people felt more worried, or people do feel more worried to unplug and take time off than in other regions? And so, it was interesting too, because we asked a lot of open-ended questions, and you could argue, oh, do you want to do that and do all the sentiment analysis and theme analysis? And I would advise you, yes, because I would say that we had about, I think, 6 or 7 open-ended items. And for each one, between 80 and 90% of survey respondents actually responded to each question. And it gave us this incredible visibility into what was going on, with our workforce beyond what they could necessarily communicate in a scale. And I remember looking at one answer, or actually maybe it was more than one, and people saying, can I be reminded? Can I be nudged if I haven't taken time off? And my first gut reaction was like, well, we're all adults. We can keep track of that. And I tend to have those moments in my life. Luckily, over time, I've allowed myself time to reflect and say, was this the right way to think about it? Should I be thinking about it differently? And in this case, I thought, it was 2020 last year. Maybe people do, deserve to be reminded, because maybe it's not just a reminder. I think very few of us don't realize that we didn't take a day off, but is that reminder from somebody also a permission? And we would hope that as adults, as somebody who's comfortable and overall scores their company very highly, doesn't feel like they need that permission. But that's why questions like this are really important, because you find out that maybe things that you took for granted, or things that you were hoping people knew they could do, they don't need a nudge on, and they actually do. And so these are some of those kinds of questions where you can really take a step back and say, maybe there's something really small, like a reminder, that I can do for my workforce. It maybe seems silly, but actually would be quite meaningful and quite helpful. So then we looked at some of the diversity differences. And again, I am a big fan of studying diversity. Here, I will show more some of the gender differences just between men and women. But again, because they were so stark. And I always mention a McKinsey study that I read last year, and I always forget the name of it. I'll blame 2020 for my bad memory. I don't know. I can't remember. But I remember how it said people were experiencing the pandemic very differently, and how people living alone were experiencing very differently, how people taking care of kids were experiencing it very differently. And they've really prompted me to start to peel back the data in as much detail as possible, because you can find these specific groups that are just going to get drowned out by the means, but you can actually really impact their experience in a really profound way if you understand what that is. And so the first one was really something that took me aback, and the stark difference in men and women reporting that the level of stress related to work was manageable, and how few women, so this is people that either agreed or strongly agreed, only half of our female population said that their level of stress is manageable. Why? So that is something that we need to dig into. And actually tomorrow we have one of our monthly calls for our group where we're going to dig into it a little more and see how many individuals volunteer. We're going to do a little more research around it, but that was really alarming in the fact that people felt so much pressure. And again, there are many things. I mentioned the first female recession. It could be the idea that in many relationships, women may more likely to take care of the house, take care of kids. There are a lot of those different things. But again, looking as a person as a whole, what can we do as an organization to help? Because clearly that stress, whatever it's caused from, is translating everywhere. So here it's saying my level of stress related to work is manageable, and people are saying, no, well, what can we do to change that? And how does that compare to life overall? So that was one area, again, where we're looking at specific groups and thinking about how can we help everyone, but then how can we also make sure that the people that are being impacted the most, we're creating things that are the most impactful for them. And so another thing that we looked at were relationships, since we wanted to make sure to know as we were shifting between offices, outside of the offices, how were people staying connected? And did they still feel like they had good relationships? Were they having meaningful conversations? And again, a huge difference between men and women. And I think this one actually surprised me more because, in some ways, if you look at gender research and if you think about stereotypes, women are generally the ones that seem to be more about relationships and finding that connection. And so, is the question that we work for a technology company, and like many other companies, it's higher and there's a greater number of men and women, so women are having a harder time finding each other? Is it that they are, women are being pulled in many different directions outside of work. So when they have time to maybe connect in a meaningful way, they find themselves needing to do something else. Again, a lot of this led to questions, but it really highlighted areas that we knew were important for us to focus on again. And then what we wanted to look at is, in general, we were looking at being able to manage the levels of stress. We found these two items that we previously discussed as having the greatest impact. So these are the different correlations or the different driver analysis that we ran. And being able to take time off was most highly related to managing the level of stress. So again, going back to that small nudge, asking somebody to take a day off, but like really asking them and not having them feel guilty can really go a long ways. And then again, on the flip side, especially for the women who are having a hard time making time for these meaningful conversations and connecting with others, that was negatively related to being able to manage stress. So it's also the idea of having this community, having support of others, or even just having potentially transparent conversations to say, I'm having a really hard time with this, and somebody's saying me too, and just knowing that you're not in it alone. So a lot of action items, a lot of food for thought. And something else, I don't know if I'm just waking up and really realizing this, or this is known by everyone, but I just wanted to throw it out in case it was, as surprising to others as it was to me, was the relationship between intent to stay with a company and engagement, especially for women. And the reason why I wanted to highlight this is because so many of us talk about engagement surveys and annual surveys and pulse surveys, and there's so much focus on engagement. On the other hand, there's a huge focus on retention and keeping our best people, and how do we make sure to do that? And as the tenure is shrinking down to an average of 2 years, what do we do differently? And I was really taken aback by the low correlation or the low drive of those two factors. And so I started to dig in. I didn't have time yet to prepare for the presentation, so if anyone's interested, we can talk about it later offline. But what is actually driving intent to stay more? So if you really want to look at retention, it seems like you can have a lot of people who are engaged, particularly women, but what else is happening? As you can tell by the visual and the theme of my story, I think it's, again, partly the whole person experience and what else is going on in their lives. But I think as organizations that truly care about our employees, I do think we have a great opportunity to make a change in that area. So where does work from anywhere go from here, right? I mentioned looking at the different data. All of this information that I shared now, I think, are underlying building blocks and the well-being of somebody and how they're handling relationships from home with their colleagues and everything. All of that plays into working from home or working from anywhere, because we are working from anywhere now when we're responding to that. But I also picked out a few specific items. We had some more, but these were some of the ones that I thought were really interesting or important if we had to pick out and select a few measures to be shown here. And so one is, the statement of, I'm able to work wherever, and however I need to, if it helps me do my best. So how much of an autonomy are we giving to our employees? Because a lot of the literature is now starting to talk about, maybe a shift from where are you physically working to also when are you working, and when are you getting things done, and when are you on, and what are the different expectations. So overall, today, it seems like we're giving our people pretty good flexibility where they're feeling like where they are today, they can be successful. The second one is more of the, straightforward, do you actually have what you need to work remotely? And the third one I found really important, and something that we want to continue to look into in more detail, is that I'm confident that I can make progress in my career or goal aspirations as I work remotely. And I would encourage you, if you haven't thought about this yet, is as organizations are thinking about how to go back and considering the hybrid model, I, towards the end of last year, spoke with a gentleman, Brian Elliott from Slack, and he mentioned a large study that Slack did and how they were thinking about the role of their managers and the leaders and going back to work. And he said at that point, their philosophy was that people will be able to return in stages, but they're going to be really taking a close look on the leaders and managers, because what's going to happen is if they communicate to their people, you can work from anywhere, but then all of a sudden offices are full with the whole leadership team every day and the management team every day. Do they really mean it? So they were thinking about being very intentional. When do people come in the higher visibility positions, just to, again, walk the walk or what they're telling their employees. So I think that this will be an item to keep an eye on, especially as we're changing the working model, and if it goes towards the hybrid model, to be able to measure the concern of people and how comfortable they feel about their career progression as we iterate the working conditions or locations. So where do we go from here? A big question is, we ran a study, we have some action items. What happens? Do we do pulse surveys? Do we not? We've surveyed our employees so much last year, maybe about their health. Are they tired? What happens? And so our recommendation and what we will be doing next is pulse surveys, but based on results. So we have in our system a roster platform that ties each response to a specific individual. And so we're able to trigger, depending on the responses, some follow-up pulse questions. So instead of necessarily doing a pulse based on time, we're going to do pulse based on the person. So the person that maybe had a very fast pulse, we're going to check it again on items where maybe they were experiencing the greatest discomfort or we had the greatest opportunity to improve. We want to see, are those things that we did, were they meaningful? Did they have an impact? But I wanted to put in a but. We don't want to forget to check in on things or people that were okay, because everything is moving so quickly. And so a person that might have been doing just fine several months from now could have some challenges in an area that didn't show up. Areas where we were doing great, maybe we're communicating well, or managers, are really supportive of well-being. Well, maybe a year and a half into a pandemic or now into some kind of a hybrid model, managers are not as supportive anymore. We need to know that. So we're going to balance the follow-up of very specific items with the people that had the greatest pain points with checking in on people in general. So we don't assume somebody's okay for too long and then all of a sudden things change. We also do believe there is a big value in empowering managers. And so this is a little bit of a slippery slope, especially for larger organizations where you say, but if we allow the managers to do surveys themselves and ask whatever they want, how are we going to trend the data, or what questions are they going to ask? And there's going to be some risk probably. In some cases, we might not be able to get trending data. We are going to equip the managers with a question bank so they can select. I got my degree in IO psychology when I was very young. And since then, I've had a lot of my colleagues who wanted to do surveys and in different jobs throughout my life say, oh, can you take a look at this? And I would think, oh, no, double-barreled question, leading question. So we'll try to coach our managers as much as possible and provide them resources just so they can ask the most meaningful questions, not even as much as policing them, but just having had that experience that it's not maybe as easy as it looks, but we want to empower them to be able to have that ongoing conversation. And then we want to involve the employees. So one of the things that we didn't ask about, but really came out as a theme in our survey, was employees wanting to see each other. So they weren't necessarily saying, get me back to the office, although a couple are maybe ready to get out of their home. But by and far, people just said, I miss my colleagues. I want to see them. Can we organize, some outings in a park, or can we do an exercise class, or can we just do something where I'm connecting with them in a different kind of way? And I thought, what a brilliant idea. Who's going to do it? Do we ask our HR department? Who do we task with this? And so our plan is to ask our employees to volunteer, because imagine somebody that's really passionate about cooking and really good at it, teaching a cooking class, or somebody that's a yogi and really enjoys it, running a yoga class, or somebody saying, hey, we're not in the Austin office, but we know we have a lot of people in the area. So, on a nice day, maybe let's go to a park, or let's do something where we're, safe and distant and open air, but we see each other a little bit. So I think there's a really great opportunity to ask employees, and I think they're going to be really excited to have that positive impact. So a lot of these are maybe no-brainers, but again, I think sometimes it's really nice to just share some ideas, talk about what we're doing, talk about the insights. I will wrap up with that and jump back to Al. I'm sharing my information because one thing that I always say at the end of my talks, and I always tell Al and anybody new that I meet that can even remotely be a part of this community, is that it's a community that is so meaningful to me. I've met so many incredible individuals that have impacted me as a person, the way I think about life, the way I think about work. And after every single PAFOW, I've had people reach out to me. I've reached out to a lot of different speakers, to participants. So I just wanted to share my information and invite you to connect. If there's any way that I can help you, if we can have virtual coffee, if we can meet in person someday, hopefully not too far away, I would absolutely love that. So here's my information. And Al?
Hey, well, Sanja, thank you. You're very kind. And I mean, that's just an understatement. So yeah, obviously you are, I'll just say what I was going to say, an artist. And we all are artists in this work. And we need to, in my view, think of ourselves. There's a level of creativity that you applied in the work that you shared that gets to insights that are very poignant and actionable. So, thank you for doing what you're doing and inspiring others to take that tact. I think it's critically important. So thank you. And again, thanks for the kind words. We've talked at length about well-being, happiness, purpose, all these different themes, at length over the years and certainly during the pandemic. And one of the themes that we've touched on, which in my view is grossly missed or it's understood, if that's a way to frame it, is this idea of individual capacity. Like we can only do so much given the constraints in our lives, how proficient we are at a certain skill, the resources that we have in the home, our relationships. So, somebody with good relationship equity in a wide network can easily get things done better than a new hire. So there's all these variables that are impacting how we can do work. And yet, oftentimes we're graded, aka performance, on a standard scale, and it doesn't appreciate all these realities. And so what I see you doing is pursuing an understanding of those individual realities so we can respond appropriately as organizations, as people managers. So I just want to get your thoughts on that notion of like trying to understand individual realities at scale, because it's not, it's not hard. I'm sorry, it's not easy.
No, and it's interesting that you say that, because so what I'm actually still doing today, even almost 2 months into my job, is I'm having daily one-on-ones with people on my team. Daily. Like you heard, like no, not weekly. Like, and why? It's because their well-being is so important to me. Their capacity is so important to me. The ability for me to connect with them and understand what barriers are they facing and obsessively think about how to remove those. Those are the people who I can impact the most as their leader. So that's one of my responsibilities. I mentioned the survey that we did. There was much more on a company scale, because what I also realize is that not everybody has necessarily maybe I don't know if capacity in this sense is the right thing. I have or experience. I have my entire career obsessed about making people happier. Not everybody does that, and it's okay. They shouldn't. People have different passions. People have different areas of focus. But what I can do as an individual is look around my organization and say, who else cares? And if you care, I will help you execute on that. And that's exactly what I was doing here. Is people said, we care. can you help us with what we do?
Mm.
And so it's around helping it scale. And in organizations where leaders say, we think maybe you're one of the people most in tuned. Can you ask the questions? You know how to connect with people, you know how to do it. What do we do with the pull through? How do we, I mentioned we're having our meeting for our minority female group tomorrow to be able to really understand and go into these survey results and understand the needs at a different level. So there are all of these different ways of understanding capacity. Is it sometimes a perfect science? I don't think so. But I
Mhm.
think it's the desire to understand and connect with people on any level that you can, and then iterating that process for how to help them. I think people will value that incredibly, because even if you're not even doing it close to perfect, that effort is transparent.
Yeah.
And people will come and meet you and be more open and give themselves in a different kind of way, than if you don't approach it in that kind of way.
Yeah, and again, thank you for saying that, because you're going back to the artist notion. You're finding what's appropriate for the system for which you're responsible in that point of time is what's called for. Many are looking for the perfect painting, the perfect resolution, and it's about putting something on a canvas and trying to and present it to the world. And so there's I'd love to talk to you more about this, but given time, this is where I want to take this. So if somebody's listening to us, it's like, okay, there's two good-hearted people, I'm here for a people analytics and future of work event, and they're like singing Kumbaya, and they want people to hug, and at the same time you have a doctorate in a quantitative discipline, and you have you're an executive, you deal with executives, and you influence people around the world. I've been told I'm an alpha, I'm an athlete, whatever. The reason I'm saying all this is that doing what we're talking about, trying to understand the individual experience and then respond appropriately, is not just a virtuous right thing to do. It's good business. And there's evidence to that effect. We're not just talking, niceties here. It actually makes good sense. And can you speak to that, a little bit? If there's, a healthy skeptic, or maybe an unhealthy skeptic out there, about, taking this approach and truly prioritizing this pursuit of understanding?
Yeah, and I've thought about that so much. And I think there was recently an article somewhere, again, my lack of memory of, citing the source, my PhD in me should know better. But I think it was something along the lines of like how much pressure the CEO of Pfizer put on creating a vaccine. And maybe if he was so nice and didn't put the pressure, we wouldn't have that vaccine today. It was a headline. I read a little bit of an article. I don't know the CEO of Pfizer. I don't know any of those workings, but that notion jumped out at me.
Mm.
And I think that there are a lot of people out there that buy into what we're saying, that understand the good of the humanity, the connecting, that if you put out good into the universe, it'll come back. If you treat your people well, they will treat you, there is a lot of data. If an organization doesn't want to be like that, they can choose a different model. They can choose a different culture. That takes me back to my, first statements, that not all of us are going to have the same culture. Not all of us are going to have the same business decisions. And if somebody is not convinced yet, I think there is a lot of research out there that shows it. But not all of us have to have the same culture. So maybe try it a different way. And maybe there are going to be enough people drawn to say, okay, I'm just going to come and I want to do my working hours. And I don't want to think about work. And maybe I don't want to be passionate. I'm not that person. Most people that I talk with are not those people. And then those organizations would either learn that it's not the right strategy, or maybe they'll find that they can attract enough people. But I think to those that want to create that environment, like we live one life. Like I always, in the back of my mind, almost, I kid you not, every day when I think about how I want to spend my hours, I think about that, story around when you're in your deathbed, what are you going to remember?
Yeah.
And I almost always think about that when I make decisions and how I want to spend my day. And so I think for the organizations, it's a little bit of the same. Like if you feel like a certain thing is the right thing for your business, and it's not about creating this joyful and, fluffy, like not fluffy, but joyful, welcoming, empowering culture, it's okay. Not all of us have to follow the same path, but I do think that there are there's a lot of data out there that shows the relationships around diversity, around the kind of culture that you build and the business impact, that if somebody's interested but skeptical, write to me on LinkedIn. You have my name now, and I will send you some articles. But I do think that there's an opportunity for everybody to build their own. And I hope as an organizational psychologist and a pure proponent of happiness in every part of our lives, that most people decide to create those organizations that are more welcoming.
Well, I'll just say this as we close, because I mean, this is my personal opinion, but it's based on data, is that young people, what I would call high value talent, have more and more choices, even in the midst of the pandemic, in the wake of pandemic. And their ability to call BS and move to cultures that resonate with them, not only that provide them with a sense of purpose and safety and, all that, but also are providing good in the world. There's, as you well know, tons of emerging data and research that validates that point. So I think it's, if they're not doing it now, they're going to have to be doing it, pretty soon, particularly if it's a large company. So, again, I thank you. That's all I have to say. There's just thank you so much, and you keep doing the awesome work that you're doing, and look forward to hearing more in the near future, and hopefully we can get together in person before too long. So we'll see.
I told you last time we talked, as soon as I can get on a plane to come see you, I'm there.
There we go. There we go.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. I've loved all of the speakers. You are incredible in bringing people together. So thank you for making me a part of it. Thank you for teaching me so much today over the years. It's just an absolute pleasure to be a part of your community.
Well, thank you again. All right. You be well. All right. Thanks. Bye.